Well, hello everyone, and welcome back to Hoffman Reproductions. Ben Hoffman here, and today's episode we're going to cover, as you see there, the brown Bess Musket. Now, more specifically, there were various patterns that came out. We're going to talk today about one of the first model patterns. The very first time it came into being, when it was actually designed, the brown Bess Musket, was in the late 1720s. And the very first pattern that they came out with was the 1730 pattern, which this closely replicates here with a few subtle differences. The brown Bess Musket itself saw a service life of over 100 years, so that's a pretty formidable piece to have in service of any nation. Primitive of today's standards, but state-of-the-art in its day. It was used in a great many wars, including the French and Indian, American Revolution, and even the War of 1812. Not the first model, they evolved, but the brown Bess Musket was used all through those wars. As far as the name Brown Bess goes, it's kind of steeped in legend nowadays. We don't really know where the name came from. Some people say it was due to the fact the brown color of the stalk. Other people say it was the brown color from rust the barrel would pick up when the troops had it out in the field. And still other people say that the gentleman that played a hand in inventing the weapon, his horse was named Bess, or even his sweetheart was named Bess. So those are all colorful stories. We're still not really sure where the name came from. Perhaps one of those is true, and maybe one day the truth will come out. But the type of musket that we produce, as far as the first model goes, we build these from the raw parts that we purchase through Loyalist Arms. They're a company that is based out of Nova Scotia, and they personally lease a company overseas in India that exclusively produces these parts for them. It's not that they don't produce parts for other companies involved in reenacting. They do, but the parts that they produce for Loyalist Arms are strictly based, it's a binding business agreement solely for them. Now, when you talk about Indian-made muskets, all kind of red flags tend to go up as far as their safety. And after several conversations with the owners of Loyalist Arms, where they procure their parts, I have been assured that the parts that the company that they are leased with overseas produces firearms and parts that are designed to be fired. They're not props. They're not wall hangers. That's an argument that is hotly contested even to this day. But I have the word of the owners of Loyalist Arms, Blair and Linda Higgins, delightful people, that their parts are designed and meant to be live fired should you choose to do that. Now, moving on here, the process that we use, and let me go ahead and pick this up so you can get a little better look at it. I guess I should back up a little bit. The pattern that we have settled on, again, they started producing these in 1730. That was the first pattern that was ever produced. And the brown Bess went through a lot of very, very minor changes when each new pattern would come out. Some were as slight as just a trigger guard or perhaps the ramrod change. This particular one, if you want to get picky, would be very closely patterned after the 1740 pattern, as far as the fittings, the stock, the caliber, the barrel length, the lock. One feature of the 1740 is the bridle on the frizzen. That's indicative of a 1740, and that's the pattern that we've settled on. That way it covers a broad range of uses within the reenacting community, and it's a good looking gun as well. So what we do, as I said, we purchase these parts through Loyalist Arms, and we kind of have it's a handshake agreement, but it's a good binding agreement. They allow us to purchase these parts in the raw. They won't do that for everybody, but after we built some trust, they allow us to do that, and they ship the raw parts straight from the factory. They give them a once over, make sure there's no flaws, and then they send them to us. And when we get the raw parts, we completely break every nut and bolt down on these guns. Literally from top to bottom, the entire gun is disassembled and we rework it. Now when I say reworking, what we're doing when we do that is closely matching the original, or as close as we possibly can, down to the proof marks on the barrel, reprofiling the stock. One big thing we do, one comment that we've been told is how much lighter weight these are than a lot of reproductions. We take a lot of weight off of the gun, the stock, the brass. All metal fittings are reprofiled, the lock is reshaped. We heat treat the frizens in a forge. Do a lot of just basic upgrades. We rework the locks completely on the inside, final hone the parts all down in there, lighten the trigger pull, and we go over it then with a period correct finish that closely replicates original Bess's. So the end result is you get a really good looking brown Bess musket, appropriate for French and Indian War and even earlier, and safe to shoot. One thing that we do when we break the guns all apart, a lot of the concern nowadays rests with the barrel. There's a lot of information out there saying that, you know, these are pipe bombs and if you pull the trigger you're crazy. From the parts purchased from Loyalist Arms, I can't speak for other companies because I'm only affiliated with Loyalist Arms, that's not the case. These are safe. And not just to take my word for it, we proof fire these barrels when we get them. So if you're not familiar with that, what we do is we take the barrel out of the stock, we mount it in a fixed jig, and we put 150 grains of powder with a patched ball down the barrel, and we fire the gun, essentially trying to cause a failure. And before we do that, starting at the breech, every 4 inches a measurement is taken with a dial caliber, very precise measurement, every 4 inches from the breech forward. After the proof firing, if that varies just even a slight bit, the barrel is to be discarded. We've proof fired over 5 of these barrels now and have never had one of them vary so much as a thousandth of an inch. So we want everybody to understand that when we send these to them, no, they're not foolproof. If you overload them or you shoot smokeless powder, you don't take care of it, it's, you know, it will deteriorate and is just as dangerous as any gun be if malused or malcared for. But if you stay within the recommended powder charge, you take good care of the gun, they're good serviceable pieces that you'll have lots of fun on the reenacting field, or if you like to live fire, do that too. So again, this is the finished product here. Hold that up so you can see it. And so far the feedback has been really good from individuals that have purchased these from us. This book I have here, this is, I don't know if you can see that or not, but if you're interested in furthering your knowledge on the brown Bess musket, I would very strongly recommend this book. This is the one we use to get all the details right, and it goes through each model and totally breaks them down, color photographs up to the tiniest details, even the screws, the engraving, the stamps, everything. And it's called The Brown Bess, an identification guide and illustrated study of Britain's most famous musket, by Eric Goldstein and Stuart Mowbray. So I'd recommend that book if you want to further your knowledge, and that's the one that we use to try and make these pieces as historically correct as possible. So that's the rundown on the brown Bess musket, or first pattern. If you've enjoyed this video, you're going to want to stay tuned for the next video that we do, because we're actually going to take this specific musket out and live fire it for you and show you what it's capable of, how well the lock works and whatnot, and demonstrate all that. So that will be part 2. So once again, thank you for tuning in with us, and until next time, take care.